When you look at this man, Steven J Sandison, at first he gives the impression of a man who might have been typecast as a serial killer in a movie. Standing in court, wearing prison coveralls, with a weathered face and a cold look in his eyes, he explains in a calm, matter-of-fact way how and why he killed his cellmate. And these words have had millions brand him as a hero. And every time I see this clip, I'm left wondering what's this guy's whole story. Let's take a look at Steven J Sandison, the inmate who killed a child abuser. This video is sponsored by Helix. Helix makes premium mattresses and bedding custom fit to your needs and shipped free right to your door. Everyone sleeps differently, so Helix has you take a sleep quiz to match your body type and sleep preferences. I'm a side sleeper, so Helix set me up with a Sunset mattress. I'm on my second Helix mattress now over the course of more than 2 years, with the Glaciotex upgrade on the new one because I like to be cool when I sleep. And I've also been using the Helix frame and foundation, which are superior to box springs for foam mattresses, and I've been having the best sleep of my life. Helix delivers your mattress right to your door with free shipping in the US. Comes rolled up in a box and is easy to set up. And to make sure you love your Helix mattress, there's a 100 nights of sleep trial. You also get a 10-year warranty, as well as financing options and flexible payment plans. And Helix mattresses are fiberglass free. Just go to helixsleep.com/wang. You'll get 20% off your Helix mattress as well as 2 free pillows. Ted Dyer was convicted in early 2014 for abusing a 9-year-old. He was ordered to serve 25 to 50 years at the Saginaw Correctional Facility. It was in those first 10 months that he shared a cell with Steven J Sandison. Steven was in there for life and had no possibility of parole. The trouble began once he discovered the nature of Ted's crimes. He staged a confrontation on October 29th demanding the nonce to leave. Instead, Ted began describing the events in detail. This enraged Steven to the point that he strangled the 67-9-year-old man to death, and his body was discovered later that day. Needless to say, there wasn't much sympathy for Ted. His death was met by cheers from the local community, celebrating the fact that there's one less monster walking the earth. Ted's victim's mother responded with a mixture of tears and laughter. Her daughter could finally feel safe. Steven was formally charged for the attack in December. 2 months later, he pled guilty to second-degree homicide. It was a speedy process due in large part to his stunning level of transparency. While many correctly assumed his motive, they were still fascinated by the inmate's explanation. That's because the man was remarkably blunt.
Well, if it's all right, I'd like to tell you where it started.
Go ahead.
All right, well, he was my bunkie, and I had found out that he was in prison for child molestation. Really bad case. So that night he was trying to justify why he did it, and I just told him to be quiet and he would have to leave in the morning to find a new cell. But he continued to talk about it and try to justify it. So he was a little bit bigger than me, so I got down and I hit him in his face a few times, and when he fell, I wrapped a cord around his neck and I took his life.
This footage made its way to YouTube, where it amassed 22 million views. He became a viral sensation as people hailed him as a hero, and this intensified after the release of his interrogation in April. The first excerpt elaborates on his rationale and his thoughts in the aftermath. He shows no remorse and says Ted got what he deserved.
I mean, obviously I don't think right. I'm in prison for most of my life, so my thinking isn't really rational. I don't know, I just kind of...
Thought that was the appropriate thing to do at that time?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess, I don't know. I just, I know murdering somebody's not a good thing, but I mean, Jesus, man, if the things this guy did, things he said he did, I do what's necessary. I do what some people won't. I mean, you guys are cops. You arrest people all the time for stuff that you wish you could shoot them in the face. I already know that. I'm not stupid. I mean,
I understand.
There's crimes that shouldn't be committed. So, I just have, I don't know, I just don't have any empathy for people.
So basically, what you did, you figure Ted got what he deserved.
Ted got what he deserved. I believe that with all my heart.
The next clip has Steven describe the actual altercation.
All right, I guess he decided to clear his conscience or something, but, he told me what he was in prison for, that he had, was accused of being an 11-year-old girl, and he got 25 to life for it, and, I told him that's enough, I don't want to hear any more. I first, punched him a couple times, still wouldn't shut up, still kept telling me he wanted to explain that he didn't do it, that he was being set up and all this stuff, and I don't know, I just got mad, and then I hit him and knocked him out, and then I took the shoelaces out of his shoes, tied them together, wrapped it around his neck, and strangled him. Put him on his bed and covered him up and climbed in my bed and went to sleep.
There is a subtle discrepancy between the two accounts. The timeline here has Ted forcing the subject unprompted, and this subtle change firmly establishes Steven as a vigilante. The narrative was set once the video reached 17 million views. There was an outpour of fan mail, primarily from women. It was an escape for them as they vented about trauma and fantasized about following in his footsteps. A lot of them expressed a romantic interest in him, and one of them even named their child after him. It got to the point where Steven acknowledged them during his sentencing, and he took time in court to reject the label of hero.
People think I'm some kind of hero, well, I'm actually not. I just, did what I thought was best in the time that I was given. I don't know, I've been getting these emails saying that, it's not my position to judge anybody. And I want to make it quite clear that I didn't judge him. I know God is the only judge we have. I've just set the appointment up.
Steven was sentenced to life on April 22, 2015. In spite of this, he can be seen laughing in photos with his attorney James Gust. The lawyer explained that it made no difference. For this term to begin, his client had to die and come back to life. He then vouched for Steven's character. The inmate had apparently threatened this scenario for months, and he promised to end any cellmate he found out abused children. But this wasn't just a warning to guards. It was also said that the deceased's family could sue for negligence. James reflected that it tells you something about him as a guy. With that said, it's still no surprise that the public continued to venerate Steven. His confession still goes viral sporadically, with Google Trends showing a resurgence last year. Yet for every supporter he has, there is always someone out there to point out his dark past. If you recall, Steven had a prior life sentence from 1992. The details resurfaced from an old newspaper. It began while the man was still in prison for larceny. He became pen pals with a 33-year-old named Linda McLean. Linda was struggling financially and lived alone. This fueled her to write to the cellmate of her friend's husband. The two became close and she began to overlook his record. And this was good timing as Steven was paroled on October 16th. Afterwards, they frequently met up to drink and smoke crack. And this part is where his story starts to deviate from the authorities. It was only a week later that Linda was found suffocated in her bed. He was brought in for questioning and admitted his involvement. However, he said that this was consensual, citing the woman's depression. This claim was disputed by her friends and loved ones. Linda's mother called him a vicious convict and believed that he only said this in order to get a lesser sentence. And if that's true, it didn't turn out the way he wanted, as he wound up being charged with first-degree murder. By some accounts, he only pled guilty upon facing the death penalty, now receiving life without parole. This discovery spurred debate over whether or not he could actually be trusted. He was, after all, an eerily calm murderer. People tried to read his behavior more critically. Suddenly, his humility is coming off as a roundabout way to brag. The inconsistencies between the two tellings of the story could have been intentional, but for now the subject is up to interpretation, as understandably, a lot of people are unwilling to dismiss him entirely. That includes criminologist Joshua Long, who spent years corresponding with him. His article about the experience was published on February 7th, 2023. Josh first reached out in the summer of 2021. He was researching stories of abuse survivors that took revenge. Not expecting much, he surprisingly received a response from Steven. At this point, Steven felt that his time was short and he wanted to share his story. The following is a paraphrased version of that account. The instability began at a young age. Steven was born Encol with a thin membrane around his head. This was viewed as a sign of the devil and blamed for the family falling apart. The subsequent neglect allowed him to roam the streets unsupervised. However, it also meant that there was no one looking out for his safety. In 1974, Steven was approached by an overweight couple in an ice cream truck. They kidnapped him and locked the 10-year-old boy in their basement. He describes horrifying levels of abuse. They apparently stuck thumbtacks in his body and burned his skin with cigarettes. The pain was so unbearable that he would escape into his mind, creating a realm that he called the Dark Woods. He prepared for death every day, but it never came. And ultimately, this torture only ever ended because the man decided one day that it just wasn't necessary. The perpetrator looked him in the eyes and said it didn't matter because he was already dead inside. So he dropped Steven off in an alley and he ran back home. And in spite of the boy's disappearance, his father offered no comfort. In fact, he actually blamed Steven for letting it happen. This was the final straw for him, and he ran away, beginning a life of crime. Most of his adult life was spent behind bars, with a record of starting fights and stealing cars. He internalized this idea that he was empty, and his only purpose was to stop children from being hurt. With that said, it's worth noting that Josh was unable to corroborate this story. He couldn't find any evidence of this kidnapping having occurred. This could be explained by the father not reporting the incident. But also, Steven had claimed to kill several gay men while hitchhiking. And when asked for more details about this, he refused to elaborate. To make matters worse, the article has since been deleted. It's unclear if this is related, but it could mean that Josh had found some kind of inaccuracy that he wasn't comfortable keeping published. Regardless, Steven had clearly embraced his notoriety. Not only was he satisfied in having taken Ted's life, but if given the chance, he would do it again. He planned to attack more abusers if let out of solitary. And that was where Josh's real interest lied, finding it a sad reflection of reality. He writes, "Steven's story cannot end well. It started off terrible and has only gotten worse. I'm grateful that he was willing to speak with me and share his experiences so we can learn from his tragic life. But I can't imagine any outcome that brings him real peace. There are an unknown but large number of victims of CSA who are technically survivors because they did not die, but who do not consider themselves as having recovered from their abuse. CSA is not a crime that can be repaid with some punishment or monetary fine. It is a traumatic experience that can have disastrous consequences for the victim, their loved ones, and society. Those children grow up. Some of them become self-destructive. Some become criminals. Some emulate their abusers. And some get revenge." Steven Sandison is a textbook example of how child abuse can result in violent crime. We all have an interest in preventing child abuse, because child protection is crime prevention. And that's the story of Steven J Sandison. If you like this video, be sure to hit notifications and check out my video about the composer who faked being deaf. I'm out.